thinking out of the gender box. First, sadly, it proves till Sri Lanka has not understood that gender is not a woman issue, it is a human issue, because today we see more women but less men in this room. WIM personally wrote to most CEOs and HR heads informing it's open for all gender. Yet, we were informed when the gender word is included, the men declined to join the program. You cannot step forward without men and women both understand it is not about our gender, which makes us and our organization successful. It is our competencies and attitudes. Saying that, first, let me introduce the keynote speaker for today. Deputy Minister of State Enterprise Development, 25-year career as a professional, he has worked to foster the highest standards in financial institutes of Sri Lanka. He has always wished the same high standards for our politics as well. He is a person who brought professionalism in politics with much respect as he left a position as a Chief Executive Officer of NDB. He once said at a WIM program in 2014, he was asked how he made the decision knowing it is not going to be easy to be in politics in Sri Lanka. His words was, being the decision finally is a response to call of my conscience. It is for more an opportunity to take forward the values and concerns I have carried throughout my professional career. It is a means to help build in this unique post-war moment of post-independence history, a Sri Lanka that shines unity, equality, and opportunity. This was said at a WIM tea break when you were in the opposition. Bit about his professional and academic background. He holds a degree in economics and politics, MSc in economics from University of London. He was the Vice President of Citibank, Director Chief Executive Officer of NDB, Advisor Director to the BOI, Founder Chairperson of Information Communication Technology Agency, ICTA, Pioneer of the Government of Sri Lanka, ICT-led development program Sri Lanka, Advisor to the Minister of Economic Reform, Science and Technology, spearheaded the first ICAT Act of Sri Lankan Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Deputy Minister, Eran Wickramaratne. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the High Commissioner of the Maldives, Amina Arif, Country Head of the IFC, Mrs. Dawn Austin, Dr. Rohantha Athukorale, Ms. Kashmira Mewawala, I hope I said your name right. Sulochana Sigera, and the leadership of WIM, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be here today and to share a few thoughts which I don't think, Sulochana, are going to be on your topic, because I really never understood your topic. Thinking out of the gender box. However, before I share the few thoughts that I have, I heard in the introduction me being quoted as having said something in 2014, and in closing they said while he was in the opposition. And that certainly conveys something about what's happening in government. And as I sat here, Dr. Rohantha Athukorale also quickly whispered something in my ear, which was something like this. He mentioned an institution, and then he said, we got so many private sector people to actually cross over into government, and they have left. And so I quickly asked him why, and they said, and he said, because obviously they were not satisfied with the way things were happening. It may be corruption, it may be the way things are managed, and so forth. And I thought I might make a quick response on that. And I think this response comes because I believe that change is always necessary if a society is to advance. And actually, who are the change agents? I think if Sri Lankan society is to advance, for sure the role of women in society has to change. One way I look at my own journey is that you don't go into something expecting the circumstances to change just because you are there. It will not happen. But you go into the journey because you think that if you are there, that you will pursue with the change. Nobody is going to give it to you on a platter. Often people ask me, what is your reflection now, being a full-time politician for a few years? And I say this, that often what I see is not a green politics or a blue politics. I see two different political cultures. One political culture is something that has evolved over a period of time, and the green merges into the blue. You sometimes don't really know where somebody actually even stands in terms of the colors in the political spectrum. But they all have something in common. They epitomize a certain political culture, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of operating, a certain values or a value system that they hold in common. And then I see, and this is the ray of hope, a new generation of people, younger, better educated, more globalized, and certainly with a set of values that are different to the set of values that have been held historically. I remember my first day in the Sri Lankan Parliament, being the total outsider into politics without having any family advantage to be in a political seat. I looked around in Parliament and I counted for myself from the history I knew that there were at least 42 families that were actually seated. Now for those of you who come from South Asia, I'm sure that's not unusual, because South Asian politics is riddled with it. It's a father and a son, or if it's the husband's missing, it's a wife, or it's a daughter, uncle, auntie, or somebody else. And therefore, the culture that I was talking to you about perpetuates itself over time. And the challenge that we have is actually to change it, to open the system so that more people from different walks of life could actually come in, because change is not possible unless the system is open and change agents can actually come in. And this is where Sri Lanka lags, even in the South Asian table. Even though our South Asian neighbors look at us and say our women are ahead in many things. In political participation, I'm shy to say that we lag the rest of South Asia with the lowest participation, 2 to 3% in local government and about 5% in the Sri Lankan National Parliament. And that has to change. I go to many functions, and sometimes the functions are functions from educational institutions. giving diplomas, awards, degrees, and so forth. I can never get out of the gender box. I always look and I actually count. And I'm increasingly finding that a lot more women are actually carrying the diplomas, the degrees, and the awards than men are carrying. At the pace we are growing, certainly the women in this country will just not only take over education, but will also take over management. It's just a matter of time. We know today there are many obstacles for women in management. In education, not so. O-levels, A-levels, university. With the exception of a few faculties in the universities of Sri Lanka, in almost every faculty, women lead. But that does not necessarily translate into working in the labor force. Again, when you look at working in the labor force, we have one of the lowest participations of women in the labor force, which is about 1/3 of the Sri Lankan labor force. We know that there are shortages that are developing in this country. I see Mr. Jayawardene here also, and there are many other ladies here who probably run businesses, and you know that often you are short of people to work in your organizations. I'm told that in the BOI companies there's at least 150,000 jobs that are vacant. But we cannot find the labor. And on one hand, people on the streets demanding better salaries, better work circumstances. And on one hand, people come to politicians like me on open day, asking for a job and giving their CVs. On the other hand, there are jobs, but somehow this gap never seems to be closing. So there is some kind of an aspirational unemployment that is there in the market. So what do we do? I once told an audience, we will have very few choices. One is to open our markets so that foreigners could come and actually work here. And I said, if that is not socially and culturally acceptable to us, then we have to face the other reality. We have to ask our entrepreneurs to close their factories and migrate to some other environment, because businessmen and entrepreneurs will migrate with their entrepreneurial skill and with the capital they have. These are hard choices that our country faces. But the glimmer of hope is, at least in the short run, that we could increase the women's participation in our labor force. And there are a few things that we need to do, and I'm going to close with that. One thing we need to do, apart from doing the usual thing, like making the workplace more women-friendly, child-friendly, and so forth, one important thing we need to do is to have safer, convenient, public transport. This is a hobby horse of mine, and I must emphasize it again. The former government had a policy of building roads and highways. Our government's policy is no different. We built a highway to Mathura. We came in, and I remember the discussion. They said there was a plan to build it to Hambantota, and they said, let's build it to Hambantota because the plan was there. I'm one of those who opposed it, not because I don't believe in highways, but I believe more in public transport than in highways. Even from a gender neutrality position, the highways don't help. It is public transport that will help. If we are to get our women to participate in our labor force, we need to basically build safer, convenient public transport. We need to make our streets safer if we want to have women in the labor force, so that whether they are traveling at 7 in the evening or 11 at night, that they feel safer. There's virtually no prosecution for the abuse of women in public places. We see a lot of films, we see a lot on social media, but actually there are no prosecutions in this country. So we have to make our streets safer. We don't see, women in police cars. It's still men in police cars. We saw the pictures all over the social media of an all-women crew, recently in India, all-women crew, and that was going around the world in terms of social media. But I am looking for an all-women police car in our country, to start with, but we don't have it. Those are the things that will make our streets safer when men are equal to women in every way, and they are perceived to be equal. And finally, if we are to increase the participation of women in the labor force, I think the state has to provide or pick up the bill for providing for maternity leave. This might sound today like a dream because of the issues that government is facing in terms of its fiscal deficit. But this is something that we will have to do if we are to get women's participation in the labor force from 35% to 50%. We will have to do this. And maybe economically, it might make sense to do it. The disincentive for employees to hire women of childbearing age is obviously, it's so obvious that everywhere you go, some talk about it openly, others don't. Maternity leave will have to be seen as a part of the social welfare structure. It will encourage women to enter the formal work sector. It will also, I think, encourage women to remain in this country and to contribute more directly to the Sri Lankan economy. So I'm not going to say more than that. Thank you again for inviting me, and I want to wish your evening every success. And also, as Don whispered in my ear, to just say that you've got a hero in Sulochana in actually leading this organization, because she's not somebody who just stands in front, but somebody who is dedicated and on the field. So thank you, Sulochana. All the best.